This is the Amazon. More than 1.5 million square miles of rainforest, roughly the size of the continental United States. It's famous for its striking beauty and the diversity of life that calls the forest home. The Amazon also plays a less obvious, more critical role in the health of the entire planet. The billions of trees here and in forests around the world absorb carbon dioxide on a massive scale, helping to keep levels in check. Without them, a lot more carbon dioxide would remain in the atmosphere. What we need to know, say Amazon researchers, is that the CO2 now flooding into the atmosphere is beginning to overwhelm the Earth's ability to absorb it. To make matters worse, the Amazon is under attack by loggers, farmers, and drought.
We're looking at what could be the future of much of the Amazon. It's a forest that's burned repeatedly, and the trees that are left are extremely tolerant of drought. They can take a lot of drought.
Daniel Nepstead has spent more than 20 years studying how to best conserve the Amazon, often referred to as the lungs of the planet. 2005 was the driest year Nepstead has ever seen. He believes that the climate is changing here, steering rainfall patterns away from the Amazon. When the rain goes away, so does the rainforest.
Right now is probably the worst time of the day for the tree. It's having the hardest time getting water all the way up from the ground, 30 meters below, to this level. It's 100 feet of vertical draw that these leaves have to do.
What Nepstead wanted to learn was how long the trees of the rainforest could survive these droughts. To find the answer, Nepstead didn't climb trees, he dug. What he found surprised him. Instead of a shallow root system, these trees have the capability to extend roots more than 40 feet down in search of water, making them much more resilient to dry conditions than he ever expected. But Nepstead believes these trees have a tipping point.
Even that very deep soil will eventually run out of water. If there's not enough rainfall coming into the rainy season to recharge it, to supply water to the trees during the dry season, when there's very little rainfall, then they'll start to die.
Not only will a large-scale loss of these towering trees destroy a unique ecosystem, it will disrupt the forest's ability to absorb carbon dioxide, and in fact, it may do the reverse, release it. When the trees die and decompose, oxygen in the air mixes with all the carbon stored in their tissues. The result? Carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere.
There's 15 years of global emissions of carbon stored in the trees of the Amazon. So if you nudge that a little bit one way or another, it's going to change the composition of the atmosphere. It's going to make the blanket, which is now thin but getting thicker, grow thicker even faster as carbon dioxide builds up.
Ironically, it was forests such as this, from Earth's ancient past, that scientists believe are behind the rising carbon dioxide levels, overloading the system today. Geologist Bob Spicer explores an open coal mine in China, where the steep walls tell the story of an era in Earth's history, when ancient vegetation was trapped and buried, its carbon preserved and transformed into coal over the course of millions of years.
That's quite a nice little leaf. Sort of a messenger from the past.
55 million years ago, this coal mine, like many places in the world at the time, was a broad, flat swamp covered with trees and plants. When those plants died, there wasn't enough oxygen in the swamp for them to decay properly. They simply sank to the bottom as a thick, carbon-rich mass called peat.
Now, eventually, that peat surface is covered by other sediments. Sediments upon sediments upon sediments. And the increasing pressure, increasing temperature changes the peat into coal, what we have here today.
Coal is not the only product made from this kind of geological process. Oil and natural gas started off as ancient microscopic marine organisms, also transformed in much the same way. All that carbon buried for so many years ultimately would be discovered by humans. And they would quickly learn that oil, coal, and natural gas make excellent fuels. But in the process of burning all those fossil fuels, we're taking that ancient carbon and converting it into carbon dioxide. As early as 1896, a Swedish scientist named Svante Arrhenius suspected that burning these fuels on such a massive scale might actually change the atmosphere. But it would take another 50 years for the first pieces of evidence to emerge to back up the theory. In 1957, climatologist Charles Keeling set out to measure the natural rise and fall of carbon dioxide levels as vegetation absorbs it during the spring growth and expels it during fall decomposition. He noticed that the natural ups and downs of the carbon cycle weren't following a straight line. They were actually climbing, which meant more and more CO2 was remaining in the atmosphere each year. His graph documenting the CO2 rise became known as the Keeling curve.
The Keeling curve proved that human beings are increasing the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and carbon dioxide is a primary global warming gas.
Fossil fuels that took millions of years to form, we are now burning and releasing as carbon dioxide in just a few decades.
And the effects are irreversible because the gases, once they're emitted, stay in the atmosphere for decades, centuries, even millennia. While we sit here, we're breathing some of the CO2 that was emitted by the first Model T, and some of it will still be here 1,000 years from now. That's the way we're building in an irreversible problem.
The global scientific community no longer questions how we got to this point. It worries that we are pushing the climate to the point of no return. Dr. Nick Lund of the Canadian Wildlife Service is on a return trip to the remote Arctic